Hey guys, it's Josh once again with another movie review, and today we're going to be discussing the supernatural horror film, The Black Phone. The Black Phone was directed by Scott Derrickson, and it's actually adapted off of a short story by the same name written by Joe Hill. This film stars Ethan Hawke, Mason Thames, and Madeleine McGraw. Thames and McGraw portray Finney and Gwen, two siblings that live in an abusive household with their widowed father, who's actually a drunk. Unfortunately for Finney, he becomes the most recent victim of the town's serial child abductor, the Grabber. Whilst trapped in the Grabber's soundproof dungeon basement, there is a disconnected rotary phone that for some reason keeps ringing, and on the other end, there are the voices of the previous Grabber's victims. With their help and by other supernatural means, Finney must find a way out of his predicament before the Grabber kills him just like the rest of his victims. Now, unfortunately for me, when I saw the trailers and the previews and the commercials and the YouTube ads, I never saw the actual usage of the Black Phone and the other supernatural things that take place in this film. So I was a little bit disappointed that this movie really just wasn't like realistic, grounded, gritty bottle film. It is much more of a coming-of-age supernatural thriller, which there is nothing wrong with that, but I would have preferred a more grounded and reality-based story. Those tend to hit me a little bit more. That being said, we're going to get into the things that I liked about this movie, the things that I didn't like, and then eventually my final thoughts and my rating. So starting with the things that I did like, I think the most obvious thing from this film is Ethan Hawke's performance as the antagonist in this movie is really good. I think he does an amazing job as like this whimsical version of the same character he portrays in Moon Knight, but it's even scarier due to how little the story gives you information about his motivations, his backstory. Like, they play up the mystery of this character in a perfect way that makes sense with the overall plot. It's not something that is underexplained, it's perfectly explained considering you're seeing this from the perspective of the main character. Not to mention the designs of this character's costume, specifically the masks, were just amazing. There are multiple pieces of the mask, so it's not just one mask that the character wears throughout the entire story. It seems like the mask represents the character's moods, which I think will make for a pretty lucrative Halloween costume. Also, the lead actor's performance, Mason Thames, was actually really good for a child actor. I usually dislike child actors, which I will further get into in the things that I didn't like, but I thought the lead actor's performance for the most part was serviceable. But there's also great scenes in which they build tension, where you're just sitting on the edge of your seat, rooting for Finney to just escape without making too much noise or messing things up. So I thought they did a good job there. There's also the nuance of an abusive character in this film that I won't get into like too many details because I don't want to spoil it, but I thought it was handled surprisingly well. Like I said, it is very nuanced for them to take a character that is abusive, that is a drunk, and portray them not necessarily as an antagonistic force, but a victim of circumstances, which I thought was actually really well done. Another thing that I really enjoyed about this movie was the imagery that was used for a lot of the horror scenes. A ton of not only does it just invoke terrifying imagery, but also just shows how dangerous the Grabber truly is. One thing I forgot to mention that I also really liked about this movie is that the runtime is perfect. It never really feels like the movie is going on for too long. It never really feels like the movie is too short. As soon as I was about to get bored and lose interest, the movie ended, and I was like, wow. And another thing that I'll have to give this movie is the ending is actually incredibly satisfying. Like I said, they build up the tension in this movie so well that you're actively rooting for the main character, not just rooting for the antagonist to kill the main characters because they're stupid. The main character in this movie is actually really intelligent, so you're rooting for them in the sense of you're making all of the decisions that I would make, and I'm empathizing with the situation that you're in. So I can't be mad at any mistakes or anything that you do, especially considering the fact that this character is a child. Now let's get into the things that I didn't like. Like I said, I was completely unaware of the fact that this was a supernatural story, so when the supernatural stuff started to kick in, I was confused and kind of disappointed. I wanted more of a realistic, grounded, bottleneck, just straight up terrifying film, and I didn't really get that. I am also a big advocate against child actors because they're usually never believable, and a lot of times they ruin a lot of good movies for me, and there's no difference here. I feel like the main actor does a pretty good job. Now, all the other child actors, I'll say, just don't do it for me, and are really cringe. The kid actors are cringeworthy, and a lot of the lines that they say, as well as the adult characters say, are also very cliche, and I just wasn't into it. A lot of it felt very melodramatic, whereas like the children, the child actors' lines, I should say, felt like they were straight out of like a CW show. Very wooden. The delivery is very dry, and not in like a purposeful way, more so in like a this is a bad line combined with a bad actor sort of way. There are a lot of things in this movie that also bothered me in terms of just the continuity, which I guess just placates on the idea that the Ethan Hawke character is very reckless and careless. Because there are certain aspects of this movie, for example, if you've seen it, I'll just say The Window, that once something happens with it, it's not referred to again, it's not acknowledged, nothing happens, there was no risk as much as the scene was centered around the window tries to make it seem. The character doesn't even care about what's going on, you know, and it just really took me out of the movie. The biggest complaint I have about this movie is that majority, if not the entire town, is completely aware of the MO of the grabber. And for some reason, the grabber is just driving his black van around the town and no one cares. In fact, did the cops never even think to investigate something in that general area? Because the van isn't hidden. You know, it's not under a tarp or anything like that. And even then, if I'm a police officer and I hear that there's a serial child abductor on the loose that uses a van, regardless of the color, I'm going to investigate any location that involves or has a van parked in front of it. You know what I'm saying? That's just me. Overall, I wasn't as enthusiastic about this film as I was the previous film I reviewed, Nope. However, that doesn't mean that this is a bad movie by any means. It's just not one of my favorite movies. I think that this is a decent horror thriller with effective imagery and tension-filled scenes and a terrifying performance from Ethan Hawke. However, everything else involved in the movie, including the supernatural elements, the child actors minus the main child actor, and the other adult actors, as well as some of the lines in the script, to me just were cringeworthy and cliche. Overall, I have to give this movie a 5.5 or maybe a 6 out of 10. But if you enjoyed this review, thank you so much for watching. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye-bye.